Hey everyone, welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ, your go-to source for insightful conversations on human-centric AI readiness, talent transformation, responsible innovation, and the future of work. Today I'm joined by Jerry Jao. He's the CEO of Employ, a leading talent technology platform that brings together many powerful hiring solutions, including Lever, JazzHR, Pulver, and more. In our conversation, Jerry shares how lessons from his entrepreneurial background in AI-driven consumer personalization are now shaping his vision for a more human, more effective hiring experience on both sides of the market. We get into how Employ is using AI to streamline the candidate journey, reduce the burden on TA teams, and address some of the unintended consequences that emerge when AI gets deployed on both sides of the recruiting process. If you believe that finding the right job or the right person for it should feel less like a numbers game and more like a meaningful connection, this is a conversation worth your time. Thank you as always for listening and for being part of the Elevate Your AIQ community. Let's go talk to Jerry. Hey everyone, welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jerry Jao. How are you today, Jerry?
Hey, Bob. Good. So good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Congrats on your new role at Employ. I want to hear all about it, and we got a lot to dig into, but I thought we could just start with you giving my listeners a little bit about your background coming to the U.S. and school and what you studied and all these great ventures that you started before coming to Employ. So I'll let you just give a little bit about your background.
Sure. I guess there's always a little bit of entrepreneur at heart. I moved to the States when I was 13, so it's been a very privileged ride to grow up in the land of opportunities and start businesses. I used to sell Game Boy games on eBay to selling Costco candies at schools. And along the way, I've discovered sort of the magic of e-commerce. So I started a company, Retention Science, back in 2012. We're leveraging AI and machine learning capabilities to help brands to create a personalized experience for the customer. So think of brands like Dollar Shave Club, Shinola, based out of Detroit, to like Fix Scrubs. We help these incredible businesses to communicate to their customers in a way much more personalized. So Bob and Jerry have different preferences for colors or style. We're able to understand sort of based on your behavioral norms, how often would you be purchasing or prefer to be communicated? And so it's much dated prior to like GPT making AI sort of a thing that is today. So super excited to be taking some of those lessons and apply to where we're going in terms of hiring and Employ.
Yeah, amazing journey. You remind me of my brother who always had that entrepreneurial spirit. He was running businesses, I think, in high school and definitely in college before he started many of his ventures as well. So yeah, really, admirable to have that kind of initiative and curiosity and sort of learning as you go, as you figure it out. One of the things that I thought, I guess I was curious about is, you're shifting from, the consumer space and all the analytics that you had at Retention Science, which in itself brings me back to my IBM social analytics days. But sort of translating some of that consumer intelligence and consumer experience to the candidate experience. And I saw this through line. I saw some of your opening message to the Employ team, I guess a couple months ago now, around like human connection and strengthening human connection. And so I thought that might be, not to put words in your mouth, of course, but I thought that might be one of the sort of through lines that sort of bridges those two universes.
Yeah, and I think, and I love the name of your podcast. Like I think about AIQ, and the reality is I think hiring is there's so much people component, and in terms of really assessing, hey, would Bob be a great culture for the companies, a part of a cultural fit, and also what I would like to say, it's really cultural add. And so I think that's something that AI is not going to be able to truly assess, at least not quite yet. Who knows how capable AI will become. And certainly it can sort of eliminate a lot of manual things. That's a part of a hiring process, which I think we all believe is sometimes could be quite manual and just in terms of different, whether it's scheduling an interview or screening a resume, which I know we'll talk a little bit more later. But even prior to getting to Employ, I was a customer of Lever for about 6 years with the companies that I've started. And I've always thought like, it's just there's so much more we can do with hiring, and I certainly believe I really believe in the mission of the business, and what I'm most excited about is in a time like this is certainly create a more effective process for people to be able to provide for their loved ones by getting to their dream jobs. And on the flip side, it's helping employers finding the perfect candidates and slash job seekers. So that's certainly something I'm really excited about with or without AI.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just like if you were building any, sort of two-sided marketplace, I guess you got to look at, the needs and expectations of both sides and try to improve efficiency and effectiveness at the same time. I like the way you sort of frame that because I feel like, you know, we as people have so much potential if only, we were given, different opportunities. It's everything from training and, reskilling, upskilling to actual, roles to see how people do and acclimate in new environments and handle adversity and conflict as well as collaborate and innovate. I know you spent a lot of time thinking about, how do we innovate? And you've also spent a lot of time on the responsible AI side, or I should say responsibility, even maybe before AI was such a household term, but really how do you think about, moving forward in a constructive direction? So maybe move fast and don't break so many things is one way to think about it.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like some of your early experiences lend themselves well to what you're trying to do. And you've got a lot at your disposal in terms of the component, parts and how do you make them all more effective, simultaneously.
And I think, Bob, one more thing to add is I think of like, at the end of the day, we're all people. So drawing a sort of a connection from my previous companies, selling to consumer and through consumer lens, like I think we're hiring managers or job seekers, we're all people at the end of the day. So how do we, and if you look at whether it's job matching or skill screening, a lot of that, it is really about ultimately, it's like, how do we personalize that experience? So most importantly, I think job seekers, a lot of times they find it's just really frustrating to find jobs and they feel like their NAS resume maybe like get overlooked. So how do we really make sure it's a thoughtful process for both sides? I think there's just a ton of opportunity moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. When I think about the ways in which people are using AI on both sides of this, right? The candidates' use of AI, the recruiting teams, use of AI. I mean, it's tough because you're trying to build these relationships. You're trying to build, win-win, teaming and find the right people for the right roles. And yet it sometimes seems like the use of AI is almost exacerbating some of the adversarial, aspects of the process. And so, I imagine that's top of mind for you every day, right? Just thinking about how do I make both the candidate and recruiter experiences, positive ones. And yet here we are trying to, play this cat and mouse game a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And and I think on the job seeker side, again, you have this sort of two-sided marketplace. Job seekers are frustrated because they are afraid that they're not creating a resume that has all the keywords or whatever. So whatever filtering systems that companies use to sort of review resumes, they don't want to be missed out. And then if you're looking at the job site, I was just with one of our customers 2 weeks ago, for every role they have opening, they're now getting 3,000 applications. And that's a lot for us, even for a hiring manager and a recruiter to screen through. So they're asking for help as well. So how do you kind of balance that? And especially in a time like this where inevitably, I think there's going to be a shrink. It depends on the role and depends on the industry. But right now, I think macro trend is telling us that there are going to be a little bit of reduction in terms of jobs available. And then so how does everyone get the opportunity to be properly and thoughtfully reviewed for a job opening is something that's really important on top of mind for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think about, I want to sort of flip it a little bit to like, your philosophy and how you're sort of reorienting the team, right? So you came in, you kind of assessed things, you brought on PJ, right, as your CTO, and started really thinking about how you redesign, some of the teams and to add some agility to what they were doing. And I imagine also to make sure that all the people in all different, whether you're in, Lever or you came from Pillar or you're in the RPO or whatever, how everyone needs to sort of think about how we can, sort of do better together. I thought we could just unpack a little bit about your philosophy and some of the moves you've already made.
For sure. So I think, first of all, I think it's the employee business has gotten, there's scale to it. And whenever there's scale and different product lines, it comes with complexities and internal challenges. And so sort of the new guy coming in, I'm sort of really trying to figure out how do we make the business a little simpler? And then also how do we flatten the organization a little bit so it empowers our teammates to be able to make decisions a little bit more real time versus having a lot of discussions for alignment and therefore driving decisions and therefore driving accountability. I think over the course of the last couple of years, because of the scale that we've gotten and because of the several product lines that you just mentioned, I think some of that have gotten lost a little bit. So sort of put my founder's hat on, trying to think about like, can we create smaller Scrum teams? And so think about these engineering pods. And so PJ and I are both coming from startup background. PJ's run very, very large engineering teams, scaled to 400, 700, international, globally distributed engineering team. But he spent the last year and a half also founding his own startup in an AI native first sort of way. So we're thinking about how do we build our product engineering delivery team to make sure that we're delivering more features in a time that there's AI enablement along with it. So we're not falling behind, and certainly flattening the organization. We're large, but also not that we're no Salesforce and Oracle. So we shouldn't have layer and layer of teams. So I think hierarchy is important sometimes, but certainly at our scale, I think that my job is to empower every teammate to do their job and make smart decisions, and we trust them. So we want to make sure that organizationally we're built to accelerate those development.
Oh, that sounds like a good plan. One of the things that I noticed in some of the research that you guys have done is on the candidate experience numbers. I mean, you've clearly made progress across your customer base, but candidate experience, still needs some work, but you've definitely made some progress on lowering attrition and some other key metrics. I also couldn't help noticing that some of Pillar's numbers looked quite impressive in addressing some of those same metrics. So I was just curious how you think about and for people who don't know what Pillar is, this is around interview intelligence, right? So basically, using AI to listen to, human to human, conversations and get a lot more context and add sort of a third dimension to what you would find on a resume, certainly.
And also note taking. Yeah. And I know you had Mark on the show before.
That's right. And so I'm just curious how, Pillar can do even more work on behalf of Employ as a whole to, improve some of the metrics, or you've already seen some market improvement and continue down some of those paths, or are there other metrics that you guys are thinking about that maybe aren't being?
This is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Indeed FutureWorks. Ryan and I attended the conference last year, and we created a limited series for Indeed where we talked to their customers. Great stories around TA and how they use Indeed to the max. So check it out. It's just Indeed FutureWorks 2024. You could search for it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.
Attracting enough attention or aren't being tracked at all, frankly.
Yeah. So from Pillar, and internally we call AI Companion, Interview Companion. We also have Screening Companion, Talent Fit, which is our assessment of, based on Bob's resume, how likely would you be a very strong match for a job that Jerry's looking to fulfill as a hiring manager. We have a ton of other metrics that we're tracking, but across the board right now, last year we closed the year, processed over 96 million applications, Bob. So I think when we think about the candidate experience, a lot of it's like, can we help reduce the work that a job seeker needs to go through to apply for a job. And then on the hiring manager / company's perspective is like, hey, what can we do to make sure that I think to us is about better accuracy and efficiency, just because everyone's so busy and quite candidly, a lot of our TA team, they don't have the biggest team, they don't have the biggest resources. So our job is to make their lives simpler and would like to say we want to help our TA team get home a little sooner just to get back to their kids, or take a 30 minutes mental break if an AI capability can help them just get 30 minutes back in their day so they can have more control over their days. Those are the metrics I would look at. In terms of the candidate experience, I think overall we think about it like in terms of reducing number of clicks or steps that you have to go through to complete an application process. Some of that's controlled by the companies, because a lot of companies that we work with, from small businesses to Evite to Fortune 100 companies, they all have different level of compliance and requirements that they need to ask for the job seeker. So of course, there's things that's out of our control, but to the extent that we can help enable or systematically reduce the number of steps or clicks for the job seekers, we're trying to make sure that entire experience is just a little more streamlined, a little more automated to the extent that we can. So taking some of the information that you previously filled out, if it's within the same company and from a privacy regulation perspective, we can provide those data so you don't have to manually enter it again. We want to figure out how do we basically enable that. So certainly we're looking at ways we can improve for the candidate experience.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Did you see any patterns across the ATS platforms? Because I know like Jazz and Lever, these are serving different types of companies.
I think if you look at some of our biggest customers, I think some of the patterns that we're seeing, so let's say someone like a Marriott International or Mercedes or KPMG, we are seeing the same candidate applying for more jobs within a company that they're posting, whether or not they're qualified. I think it's a little bit of casting a wider net behavior that we're seeing. So I think that's one definitely pretty definitive trend. So therefore increase the number of application count per job. Another common threat that we see is that because of AI, I think most of the applicants and job seekers have also honed in their ability to write a perfectly written resume. So whether or not resume continues to be a strong indicator to get that first foot in the door, I think there's a lot of intellectual debates out there right now, just because as much there's AI for screening and interviewing, there's also AI in helping you craft the perfect resume. And what we're also finding and hearing from the hiring managers, like, hey, a lot of people sound incredibly amazing. Jerry sounds like the perfect candidate for the job. But once I got on a call with Jerry, he knows half of the stuff or half the things that he claimed. Like some of them just simply maybe, it's just a little bit less experience than what the resume had maybe potentially imply. So I think there's a little bit of both. Again, we're seeing that both sides of the market, sort of trying to figure out how to use AI to advance their application or advance the screening process, but certainly AI have also making that matching process probably a little more complicated than it used to be as well.
So you've basically taken and modified a version of what Pulver had originally built, and you apply it to the top of the funnel, right? So as soon as someone applies, they get to interact with the screening companion if they so choose.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an opt-in. You could choose to opt in.
So are you seeing improvements in or dropout rates in terms of after people apply, they hit the easy button on those mass apply things, and they just think that that's going to get them, an in-person human interview, or are they embracing, the screening companion to add more color to the resume?
I think I wouldn't necessarily increasing drop-off rate, but I would say definitely there's now more resumes screened and more candidates interviewed to get to a final offer. That's for sure on the hiring manager side.
Yeah, I know there's increasing candidate acceptance of, talking to an AI screener
Yes,
early in the process
absolutely.
because what's the alternative, right? The alternative is you don't hear from that company again. So if it's a choice between, expressing what you want to express versus, in natural language, of course, versus not hearing back from the company at all, obviously you want to move forward, but you're also hopefully, weeding out people that weren't real candidates to begin with as well, right? Whether it's
Yes,
candidate fraud or over embellishment.
for sure. And I would say also with the that tends to happen probably more with frontline workers or I don't personally love the term, but like blue collar jobs, there tend to be more AI screening at the beginning. And then if you're looking for a highly skilled role, typically, yes, there's some sort of filtering, but then a hiring manager also are willing to kind of take that first leap and then just kind of get on a call with the candidate. If historically this is a very difficult job to hire, or sometimes as the TA team will call it, like if this is a new unicorn, by the time they check a lot of boxes, they're trying to get on a call as early as they can as well.
Well, I mean, I also think about like the example that you gave with this overwhelming, quantity of applications that come in. I mean, how is one recruiter or even a team of recruiters supposed to get through 2 or 3 thousand resumes? So you need another sort of intelligent, filter to help you
Absolutely,
sort of down select and move forward. Yeah.
absolutely.
I wanted to circle back on the responsible AI piece because I know you guys, take this seriously. And so I was just curious. I know you're working with IBM, the IBM Watson team, which is where I got exposed to AI, spending a lot of time with IBM research and those teams. And so I was just curious how they're helping you, not necessarily just from a, sort of governance, application perspective, but how they help you think about, responsible AI, more broadly. Is this becoming another sort of layer underneath your infrastructure, just like, data privacy and cybersecurity, or another sort of plumbing layer? So how do you think about your partnership with IBM in that regard and just, responsible AI more broadly?
Yeah, and I'm actually with the IBM team in next month in May, and I think so a lot of great things happening there. So first of all, like I think like you said, the plumbing, but it's the backend infrastructure and making sure that because some resume data they are highly confidential, and we certainly want to protect the rights of the job seekers and making sure that we don't cross share a resume ever and things like that. So, and then I think another huge area that IBM has helped us sort of think through in terms of thought leadership is also just how do we think about AI hallucinations? So there's like reducing bias when we're looking at using AI to quickly swing through thousands and hundreds of thousands of resumes. As I mentioned earlier, like this last year we processed over almost 100 million job applications. So this year we're on trend to process a lot more. So how do we balance this delicate sort of unique view of scale, but also with absolute assurance that no one is left out for whatever AI bias that might exist within the model, which again, some of that not only hallucination, right? We know AI wants to please and therefore wants to give you an answer. And then so how do we make sure we build our internal model? How do we tweak AI screening and interview companion slash pillar in such a way that we're reducing some of those natural biases that are just because of the way the data or the sample data that was available to the model and therefore created certain hallucinations and reduce that as much as we can. Those are the things that we're thinking about and certainly partnering with IBM to think through.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. There's always, regardless of, regulation or lack thereof, you've got a trusted, spot in this talent ecosystem, and you're leaning in to make sure that you expand on that perception, and then you continue to build and enhance that trust as you build relationships with others. And so I think that's really important. And then, as part of just AI fluency, readiness, however you want to sort of describe that, within the organization. I think those are the things that you want people to think about. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right application of AI? Can I trust its output? Can I validate its output? And am I applying my own sort of human judgment? We're talking about someone's, life and livelihood. And as we're evaluating the data coming through the recruiting funnel. And so I've just got to do that with the utmost care. I'm not saying they don't do that, naturally, but everyone has a human tendency to say this, this AI output actually sounds right. It sounds pretty good. The logic seems sound, but you still want to apply your own knowledge, your own intelligence, and these human attributes layered on top of that, so that ultimately it is a human making these decisions. So as you look forward, it's so hard to predict where AI is going to go, but certainly we know that the future of work is going to be this human and AI partnership. And so as you think about that in the talent acquisition space, what are some things that you think about as you try to navigate a lot of this uncertainty? How do you sort of envision some of the things that you build and the impact that has on the experience across talent acquisition?
Yeah, right now the hot topic everyone is talking about is probably fraudulent. So there's definitely the notion of deepfakes and people showing up in interviews that are not the person that ended up accepting the offer, or the person has like 3 other identities / avatars. That there's definitely versions of those stories, and so I think it's really kind of figuring out what that looks like in the new world that we're living. Like you said, Bob, a lot of us don't know exactly where that's going to end up, but we certainly knows that we need to have like the necessary guardrails to protect both the hiring teams as well as figuring out like as many jobs, as important as it's for us to make sure it is easy for job seekers to apply for jobs. How do we also kind of vet out early enough in a process that, hey, this job seeker potentially is, should be flagged because, either it's not a real person or whatever, because it is absolutely happening. And so that provides necessary risks. So if you accidentally hire someone like that and let the person into the company and have access to the system, the impact could be potentially really detrimental to the business. So I think it's definitely that.
Hey, this is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Practitioner Corner podcast. It's a wonderful podcast about the journey, the paths of how practitioners, both HR and TA, kind of go from high school, college, all the way to where they are right now. Some of the things that they've learned, how they've been successful, people that thrive around them, etc. It's a fun podcast. You'll love it. You'll learn from it. Subscribe to it. Thanks.
Where I think another big area and topic that we're thinking about is also just sort of how do we actually cut down back to some of the things that we talked about earlier, was how do we reduce the manual work that we're doing or that the hiring team or the job seekers are doing. So scheduling comes to mind. So as you can imagine, scheduling between multiple parties just never, I think there's just no perfect science. It's probably more of an art. And then so how do we do that in an AI first world where things could be potentially more automated, or, we schedule an interview and then candidates forget that they have an interview because they're on the run applying for, 50 or 100 different jobs. And then sometimes something gets overlooked. Like that happens day in and day out. So how do we improve that part of the candidate and the hiring manager's experience is also something we've been thinking about as well.
Yeah, that is an interesting area on the scheduling piece. I feel like people underestimate just how complex that is, especially for, group interviews, and you've got a lot of things to coordinate. And also depending on the type of interview it might be, you might need, certain people, but you also need to appreciate that they have work to do as well. The interviewers have work to do besides helping the hiring teams. And so yeah, there's a lot of complexity to that. So, no, I think that's an important area. When we think about AI literacy, certainly I imagine you guys have some AI literacy, training that happens, especially in this space where you've got sensitive data that you need to contend with. But I was thinking about the increase in AI skills that are looked for within, job descriptions, and that's increasingly the expectation when you go into these roles. Probably a little bit less for the frontline employees, perhaps, and some of the hourly workers that you were alluding to. But I don't think anyone's job these days is completely devoid of, the use of technology in some way, even if it's, back office kinds of things. And so are you seeing that trend as you talk to your customer base? Are you seeing that they are, you know, evolving what they're looking for in candidates? And how do you see employees' role in addressing some of that when it comes to perhaps additional interview questions or a different type of assessment that you might give to candidates?
Right. So, so first of all, the we're definitely seeing that, but I think it's the early innings in which, back in the days, employers are looking for candidates who are proficient in Microsoft Suite or Salesforce or Marketo for marketing. I think that's the early days of check the boxes. I think now a lot of companies are looking for, are you AI proficient? But that language typically is pretty vague, because does that mean you just simply know how to super prompt? Or from an engineering perspective, are you a prompt-based engineer? And so, or you simply know how to, you've been in Cloud Code, or you've used a Windsurf, that kind of like Cursor, those tool and capabilities. So certainly we're seeing that in the actual job description. And then in terms of your second part of your question, as a hiring suite, we're not necessarily the one that's vetting out the actual skill set that the job seekers are claiming, but certainly we have web templates that companies can use for their job posts. But just like what hiring managers are doing these days, they're using AI tools to come up with job descriptions as well. And we have those capabilities as well. So I would say, yeah, everyone's sort of requesting some form of AI capabilities, and everyone's screening it differently. But we are seeing that in the requisitions, in the job posts.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's still a lot of gray area when it comes to identifying some of these things. I mean, I could rattle off a dozen tools that I've used. I can't say that I could use them like in a production setting. If you hired me to, you know, do your social media campaign with, VO and other types of like video tools or whatever. But so there's a big difference between tinkering and actually building something, concrete and enterprise grade in some ways. I think that'll mature over time. But I do think at some point you've got to sort of, if AI is a significant portion of that job, at some point you've got to, make that determination. That's going to take probably more than just a conversation and taking them at their word.
Yeah, totally.
I know you've got plans to launch your own podcast, right? What are you thinking about with that? And tell me about that.
Thanks for asking. Well, it's simply, it's an idea I had because we work with so many incredible people that help people find jobs and simply want to tell their story. So it's very exclusive to in a TA world. We're calling People Actually a nod to one of my favorite holiday movies, Love Actually. I don't know if it's something you and your family have seen. It's kind of cheesy but happy. And then so it's simply to tell the stories of hiring process, interviews. I want to learn more about how people interview. What are the questions that people always ask? Like, for example, the other day I learned that one of the questions someone I really respect is, what are your non-negotiables? I was like, whoa, that's a very direct and like strong question that I was like, that's a good way to end a resume in an interview. So yeah, we're super excited about that in sort of a playground for for hiring managers to tell their stories, maybe even horror stories, some of the worst interviews they've had if they're willing to share it. Because we all know there a lot of stuff happening in an interview conversation. So I think it'll be fun.
People are going through so much right now. I feel like those honest, conversations, to your point, the good, bad, and the ugly, let's hear it, right? Because I think whether maybe turns out to be, humorous. Maybe it turns out to just be something that's, relatable. But I think, one of the aspects of human centricity that I don't personally, admittedly, talk about enough is like psychological safety and what everyone's going through as a job seeker. There's a lot of fear about job displacement. They know how difficult it is to find a job. It's can certainly be discouraging when you hear numbers like you cited, where 2,000 people are applying. It just makes people probably think if they don't apply in the first 10 minutes, their resume is never going to get seen. So no, I think it's great. And obviously I'm an advocate for podcasting as a medium. I kind of do more video. So I imagine you guys will probably lean into video. I was encouraged by OpenAI buying a podcast the other day. They of course that podcast is generating quite a bit of revenue on their own and has a sizable audience, but it gives me some hope that people are paying attention, and there's a lot of growth in the area as well. I was just reading something this morning that said, podcasts, especially video podcasts, are almost becoming or the platforms are almost becoming like the new record labels, where you're trying to attract.
Oh, wow, I haven't heard of that analogy.
Podcast hosts, and yeah, I mean, it makes some sense, and it's interesting how AI is involved in that process as well. It's pretty slick with some of the video editing capabilities that you can do now, and so I'm trying to learn some of the stuff as fast as I can, so I can take some of those pre and post production activities off my plate. But I do like that people have a deep appreciation for these types of human to human conversations, as opposed to just throwing a body of text into Notebook LM and just creating instant podcasts, right? So
I think something you said about psychological safety, I think when people could see or hear people talking, right? So it's not just a bunch of clip notes or a list driven type of insights. And then back to hiring and interviews, I think that there's definitely a lot of, I think less about fear. I think there is certainly a level of that, but then I think among job seekers right now, I think it's more around just the uncertainty that we've talked about earlier, and then how people are reacting to the uncertainty. When time gets worse, you're starting to hear the massive companies sort of going through a time of transformation, and whether or not they're the right reasons or not, they're certainly positioning as hey, AI is enabling us to do X, Y, and Z. And I know today's in April, and I know Oracle just announced another big round of parting ways with an employee base that's I couldn't even fathom, but then they're pinning it on establishing an infrastructure, and then they have to recuperate costs somewhere, which is I can imagine that's a very hard news for job seekers to sort of process. And then so I think it just comes down to, we're in a very uncertain and unprecedented time. It's almost as big of a change as when the internet first arrived back in late 1990s or early 2000, I think, and the dial band. I was having a conversation with some friends who's remember you and I remember AOL, but all the younger generation probably don't remember what dial band is, or you used to have to get on a modem to be able to get on ICQ, to be able to chat. So certainly it's really just unprecedented in every aspect of life and work, and certainly in finding a job, building a technology, everything that we've talked about today. So it's a fascinating time to live through.
Yeah, I don't think my daughter would know what to do if I handed her one of those AOL CDs I used to give you with 100 free hours of dial-up at 16K or whatever it was.
I've got a typewriter on my shelf, and my sons are like, "What are those, Daddy?"
It's funny. Dating myself, when I first got to IBM in the mid 90s, before they acquired Lotus, so we didn't even have,
Oh my God. Now
Lotus,
you're really dating yourself, Lotus.
yeah, Lotus 1, 2, 3, and WordPro, I think, was their word processor. Anyway, if I needed to send a letter to one of my customers, I had to go over to I don't know what the appropriate term for this area was, but the secretarial bay where there were typewriters, and I had to go over there and actually type out a letter. So that's how old I am. But yeah, Jerry, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time and working through some of our technical glitches in the process. But yeah, no, this has been great. So thank you very much. Anything else coming up that you wanted to mention? Any new research you guys are working on, or anything else you want to share?
Yeah, we do publish our job seekers report and also Recruiters Nation report twice a year. So comes with a lot of job data, industry data that we're seeing. So please look out for those. And yeah, like you said, thank you so much for having me and talking about things that need to be talked about, whether it's, just the responsibility of AI, how do we use it ethically in a job, in a professional environment, psychological safety, all the things that it's important, but we don't have enough time to talk about. So thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. Yeah, pleasure. And yeah, keep up the great work, and best of luck to you and the team. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.